Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone is doing well. Let's give it another minute or two to see if more friends can join us tonight, this evening. I don't expect a big crowd today, but um, these are all posted later on YouTube, so hopefully uh, people can watch it later. I know in some parts of the country, people might have already started their dinner. So I hope they can enjoy this whenever they get a chance to come back to it. But for those of you that are here, let's just give it one more minute. Your video is not on. Okay. Can anyone else tell me if it's... Is there a problem with my video? Anyone else? Does anyone else have the same issue? I can see Bhante. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's just give it a little bit more. Maybe, our friends are doing other things and they're trying to get online right now. There's 6 of you watching, so we'll just give it another minute before we start, and then they can just join us during the meditation. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today, I want to share with you a practice that I use from time to time, and it's one of the first kind of meditations that I learned. In the beginning, I usually practice 3 meditations, 3 forms or focuses on meditation. One was more of a samatha practice and just on focusing really on the breath, and another one was metta. But at the same time, there was another one which is I learned it in a Zendo. It's called shikantaza or zazen. I think we can call it in something that we can understand from the Theravada perspective is like a animita samadhi, right? A signless samadhi. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, and I don't think much instruction wasn't given to me besides just sit, don't concentrate. That's one of the things they say. Don't concentrate. Don't meditate in the sense like, don't contemplate things. Mhm. And it's basically kind of like just imagine a concentrative practice that's more open. It's wide, right? So instead of focusing on any particular sensation, any particular image or sound or thought or anything like that, it's just like a big sphere, right? A limitless, unbound sphere or dimension of awareness, Um, I think it's similar to what is known as like metacognition, right? Where you're not like looking at what you're looking, but focus more on the looking than on what's being sought. But even then, we just don't want to focus on any of the senses. It's just kind of like taking a step back and opening your mind to all experience and resting right there. And some calmness comes when you're not stuck on all these objects, all these rupas of all the different senses, all these signs. So in the beginning, I just want you to kind of like not try to get stuck on anything and don't concentrate or don't try to relax or, just kind of sit there in this kind of curious state, in this open state, and just kind of dwell in awareness or perception itself, and just give it a try, just try to step away from your normal practice and and not focus on anything. And I think it should happen intuitively. You'll see how you're kind of retreating from the object and just resting in the awareness itself. Okay, so let's give it a try. Let's practice this for 20 minutes, and then at the end of the 20 minutes, I'll do some chanting, and that'll be your sign that you can come out of your meditation. All right, let's practice this signless samadhi. So now that your mind is calm, body is relaxed, you can bless yourself with your calm mind by the great wisdom and compassion of the Supreme Buddha, truthfulness of his teachings, Dhamma, noble qualities of his perfect disciples, Mahasangha. May you be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. Sabitio Vivanjantu Saberogo Vinasatu Mate Bhavantuanterayo Sukiti Gayuko Bhava Bhavetu Sabbe Mangelan Rakantu Sabbe Devata Sabbe Buddha Nubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Ti Bhavetu Sabbe Mangelan Rakantu Sabbe Devata Sabbe Dhamma Nubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Ti Bhavetu Sabbe Mangelan Rakantu Sabbe Sabbe Sangha Nubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Ti. Also, through the power of this meritorious action, may you be free from immature company, and may you always have good companions until you attain Nibbana. Imina punya kamena mame bala samagamo satam samagemo hotu Yaveni Bana Patiya. No worries, Jens and everyone at Empty Cloud. uh, okay, everyone. So I was thinking of a topic, and then I think I'll just continue with some more self-disclosure. Some dhamma from my own experience and what I've been doing in my monk's life. So before my dhamma talk, salutation to the Buddha. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. So, one of the reasons that I became a Buddhist, and one of the reasons which I became a bhikkhu, or took the papaja, renounced the world, was because of a very important monk in my life. His name was Bhante Punnaji Mahatera. So I had been coming to this temple, Sarvath Chandra Buddhist Center in North Hollywood, for maybe only 2 or 3 months. And one day when I came for meditation, they told me there was not going to be any meditation, but there was going to be a Dhamma talk. I didn't know what a Dhamma talk was. And there was going to be this very senior monk, very interesting monk who could really connect with Westerners. So I decided to stay. To be honest, that Dhamma talk went like over my head. A lot of things were fascinating, but it was just too much for me at that time. And they said next week he's going to be giving another talk. You should come. And I was like, okay, whatever, because I had already planned that every Friday I would come to meditation. I didn't want to break that pattern. So I still came. But the second time, something clicked. There was something that he said that clicked because one of our meditators here named Selinda, she asked a question, and Bhante gave a very direct answer. And when he said that, it just clicked for me. And I said, yeah, I want to practice the Dhamma now, like seriously. So from that day forward, I started, reading Bhante Punnaji's books and listening to all his Dhamma talks online. And Bhante Punnaji was really interested in, uh, creating a bridge between, uh, you know, traditional Buddhism, whatever that means, or at least the way he knew it in Sri Lanka, and the West, right? Using Western concepts in order to facilitate understanding Buddhist concepts, right? So Bhante Punnaji focused a lot on psychology. He thought that, Westerners put a lot of trust in science, right? Or in their own ideas, philosophy, and he was gonna use, their own system as a bridge, to connect them with the suttas and the teachings of the Buddha and how it's practiced in Sri Lanka. So he decided on psychology and focusing really on not the theoretical part so much, although he did some of that, more on the practical part. So he really focused on, psychotherapy, Western psychotherapy as a bridge to understanding the Dhamma. And I think he was very successful in that. So because of him, I started reading a lot of books on the intersection between, Buddhist psychology and Western psychology, focusing mostly on psychotherapies. And so I read many books. One of the most influential books was an introduction to Buddhist psychology by Padmasiri de Silva, who was the head of the, I think, Buddhist or philosophy department in Peradeniya University in Sri Lanka. And he was also a therapist on top of being a professor of philosophy. So I really came from like this kind of early Buddhist sutta-based psychological perspective. I really took it on. And I also read many Western books like Mark Epstein's Thought Without a Thinker, Altered Traits by Ritchie and Goldman. And so I read all the books that were available to me, all the, pop Buddhist psychology books, I guess we would call them, and scholarly ones, but from people like Padmasiri de Silva, people who grew up within the Buddhist context from a Buddhist family and studied in the traditional context, their view of what Buddhist psychology would mean in the West or in modernity. But then on the day of my higher ordination in Sri Lanka, I talked to my teacher, Bhante Punnaji, because he was always traveling, and most of the time he stayed in Mahavihara in Malaysia, where Bhante K.C. Dhammananda used to be the abbot there, very famous monk. So he kind of filled in for him by request of the people there. And he went to many other places. He was also in Taiwan at Fo Guang Sha for many years as a professor of Buddhism. And so when I talked to him that day of my ordination, I was the last one because I had the less time as a Samanera. Those other people had like 8-10 years all Samanera. So my ordination wasn't until midnight. So during that time of the day, I talked to him for like an hour, and he told me, his vision and how he wanted to continue it and what I can do to help him. But then 3 days after my ordination, he passed away on the full moon night of July. Yeah. In almost 4 years ago. And so then I really felt that it was my duty. I took it upon myself to try to contribute to his work and his mission of what he wanted to do. So I decided to enroll in a master's degree program of counseling psychology. And so I've been doing that now for over 2 years. And during that time, at every time at the end of almost every class, we have what we call a case study or vignette, and you have to, diagnose the pseudo client and create a treatment plan and, do a lit review on why you use this certain sort of psychological intervention, why it's justified. Does it work? Does it work within the population? what are the benefits, what are the limitations of it. So I always try to do, my homework, my final papers on from this perspective. So I would choose, like some sort of contemplative psychotherapy, mostly looking at mindfulness, using mindfulness to kind of like treat, these pseudo clients. So in this process, I was able to do a significant literature review of focusing specifically on mindfulness-based interventions, aka also known as mindfulness-based therapies, specifically within the domain of mood disorders like anxiety and depression. So every semester, like for 2 or 3 classes, I would throw that in there, right? That was my stick. Also, at the same time, I decided to get certifications in some mindfulness-based interventions, like mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment for adolescents, and also a 12-step program called Mindfulness in Recovery. So I got those 2 certifications as a mindfulness-based facilitator. And this year, I was able to be part of a mindfulness research study at my university, where there was a 1-unit course specifically designed for future clinicians, future therapists, in which the whole weekend they would spend learning about mindfulness, doing mindfulness activities. And it was a qualitative study, which means like, just like loosely based, like formatted questions, like interview style. There was like no real quantitative measures, only qualitative. And there was a good response to it. And then about, I think, a month and a half ago, we presented this study. I'm forgetting the name of the conference right now, but we presented it, and it went really well. It was received very well. And so now we're planning to do a whole semester, a 3-unit class, which is going to be dedicated to teaching mindfulness, but this time for undergrads now. So it's going to be like an undergrad class. Imagine like mindfulness 101 or something like that, right? It's not fully developed yet. So yeah. So what did I learn like doing like this study? I feel, when I was reading all of this and when I was surrounded by people who were interested in mindfulness, I felt like there was like, I felt like everyone had drank the Kool-Aid. Like all I heard was good stuff about mindfulness, and everyone was so enthusiastic about it. And you see all these things like in Psychology Today, and like, when you go onto Google and you get your news, like mindfulness for everything. Mindfulness is the opiate of the masses now. It's a panacea for all your problems. And it was in so many different articles, mindfulness was defined like completely differently. I remember reading this report from the National Health Institute, and they said that one of the reasons that there's many limitations on mindfulness research is because people can't agree on what mindfulness is. So are they all talking about the same thing? Like, are they talking about different things? What's going on here? Everyone's using different interventions, different ways of applying mindfulness, and defining it differently. So that was one of the limitations they stated in that government report. And then when I went through like meta-analysis, I saw that there is some benefits. Like people who are treated with mindfulness-based interventions and therapies, especially for mood disorders, there was this one meta-analysis done. I think it was in 2015. Was it 2015? No, I can't remember the year right now. But if you need the information, I can send it to you and put it in the comments or in the details of the video. So there was this meta-analysis done focusing on depression and anxiety. And they did find that people who participated in mindfulness-based interventions, such as mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and other mindfulness-based therapies, they did see a reduction of the symptoms that are associated with depression and anxiety. But again, they said the limitations were that, mindfulness means different to different people, and there isn't one real way to measure it, and people are using different measurements. There isn't only one way to measure mindfulness. And most importantly, that it doesn't, there's not enough evidence right now to show that it outshines other therapies, right? It doesn't outshine treatment as usual. So treatment as usual, usually, especially for like depression, would be um, uh, psychotropic medication, like antidepressants, and CBT, cognitive based therapy. Those would be the normal things that would be used for a person with a depressive disorder or major depressive disorder. Um, and then for anxiety too, they usually don't really use like medication for anxiety that much. It's mostly based on psychotherapy, and also CBT is like the main one. Um, so it just kind of matched up in there, like mindfulness based interventions and treatment as usual. They were kind of like tied, right? It doesn't show that mindfulness outshines them. It doesn't do better than them, except within this one limited context that I think Kyokin in 2015 was the first one of the first ones to publish this, that within the context of avoiding relapse and depression, uh, mindfulness based cognitive therapy showed to be more effective in reducing relapse in people experiencing depression um, over like medication, antidepressants, right? So there it was very unique, but it's very niche right there where we can actually see mindfulness outshining other things. Um, but then I saw another study, which is very interesting, where there was this scientist who was wondering, is it mindfulness itself or is it like the whole program? Because these mindfulness-based interventions, they're like group therapies, they're psychoeducation where they teach them about like stress or whatever their problem is, anxiety, depression, and there's like that group setting where it's a support system, and there's also cognitive tools that are being used, behavioral tools that are being used. um, so there's all these other things that can contribute to the results. So then this person decided, hey, you know what, let's set up an experiment. Let's have a control group, let's have a mindfulness based cognitive therapy group, and let's have a CBE group, which is basically mindfulness based cognitive therapy without the mindfulness in it. And let's see what happens, right? For depression. Um, and they ran the study and they saw, yeah, obviously the control group didn't do so good, didn't really get much benefit. Um, but both the mindfulness based therapy and the non mindfulness based one scored the same. There was no difference. So then here we can infer that um, you know you get the same benefits whether mindfulness is there or not. So that was very interesting, right? So it kind of indicates that it's not mindfulness that's doing the work for the people with depression. It's maybe the group setting, the way it's formatted, the psychoeducation, or the cognitive tools, the behavioral tools that are being used. So that kind of that's kind of shuts down a little bit of this whole hype about mindfulness. Um, but I did find other studies where they just separate mindfulness by itself, and they do show that mindfulness, significantly increases attention and other kind of like cognitive functions. But that doesn't necessarily translate over into like helping you deal with anxiety or depression, right? Just because you're more aware, or just because you're more attentive, or you have, more clarity in your cognition, doesn't necessarily translate to helping people relieve symptoms of a major depressive disorder or of an anxiety disorder, like social anxiety disorder. It, there really isn't any connection between these two. Um, so then, knowing all of this, when I started my research assistant position at the university, and everyone's like, "Yeah, mindfulness, let's go," like which I'm super. I'm a Buddhist monk. I'm super excited, enthusiastic about mindfulness too. Um, you know, I had to put out the limitations and share with them what the research says. And I can see a lot of people didn't expect that coming from a Buddhist monk. They were thought I was going to be like, yeah, mindfulness is the best. Um, and Yeah, and I kind of received a little pushback from certain people, on this, because I wasn't going along with it. Although my professors were like, "Great, that's a great job what you're doing. We need your information," and I think it's great. But I think as Buddhist people or meditators or people that are enthusiastic about mindfulness or whatever we want to call ourselves or whatever you consider yourself, we have to be very clear, that whatever we call mindfulness in Buddhism is not necessarily the same mindfulness that's being used out there for these kind of studies. And when we do find evidence, or we read some article or some news or something comes on the TV about the benefits of mindfulness, uh, we have to understand it within its context, and we have to understand the limitations of it. Because as a Buddhist monk, I see a lot of people suffering, and unfortunately, some of these people try to do what's called a spiritual bypass. So there's people experiencing severe disorders, mental disorders, and they think that one way to overcome this health issue is to go to the temple. And if I go to the temple, I'll be free from my mental disorder. It may happen, but temples are not the site. They're not clinics. That's not what it's meant for. I'm not saying that they won't get any benefit. I think there's evidence that shows that you know um, being part of a religious group, attending religious places does help people's well-being, and having a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, also helps people that are experiencing even physical illnesses like cancer and things like that. And I do think, as a Buddhist monk that practices meditation, I have seen the benefits of reduced symptoms of like depression and anxiety and other things like that. But that might not necessarily translate to the extreme cases of people who have actual disorders, right? It might be completely different. And as from one of the cases that I shared with you, one of the articles that when they compared these three different kinds of interventions, whether mindfulness was there or not, the people got the same amount of benefit from it. So we can see there that it wasn't really mindfulness that's doing the work. It's the structure of the program that's really helping. So I think that as a monk, as someone who promotes meditation and at time supplements the benefits of meditation uh, with empirical studies, right? Evidence-based studies. We have to be very aware of the limitations of mindfulness and realize that what we're doing in the temple, it might not be the same thing that's happening out there, and this thing that's happening out there might not be, don't believe the hype is basically what I'm saying. Don't hype it up. Don't believe the hype. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Everything has to be understood within its context, and I think that's very important. We shouldn't be so enthusiastic about meditation and Buddhism that we just pick anything that sounds good, that seems to support our point of view, right? and just throw it out there and be like, yeah, science says this about meditation and mindfulness, and you're using it all just because it makes you feel good, because it supports your view, right? It validates what you've dedicated your life to, your philosophy. I'm a Buddhist person. But we have to be careful, because there's a lot of gaps in there. There's a lot of how they say it, like the devil's in the details, right? So we have to be very careful as we promote Buddhism and meditation and mindfulness and all these things. So I think I've talked long enough. If anyone has any specific questions, I know the comments were going up and down, so let me go with the comments first, and let me see if I can catch anything here. Scott Bardell, how do these systems of treatment align with Dhamma? That's like, I think, a very important question. You see, the Dhamma is not limited to an 8-week intervention. The Dhamma is not limited to 2-hour sessions once a week. The Dhamma is not limited only to mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness is only one of the 7 factors of awakening. Mindfulness, samasati, is only one of the steps in the Noble Eightfold Path. Usually in traditional settings, we talk about like sila samadhi panya, or we talk about dana sila bhavana for lay people. So, to me, Dhamma is the whole thing. It's the whole path, right? The Noble Eightfold Path. That's the Dhamma. And if we just take one of these elements and pull it out of its context and then kind of like redefine it to fit whatever you want it to do, then it's not Dhamma, right? It's not Dhamma. That doesn't mean that it doesn't help people. I think that, the evidence is very clear that it does help people, but it's not Dhamma. There might be a drop of Dhamma in there, but um, we can't consider it the same as Dhamma. Let me keep going down here. Jeff says the vagueness around the term mindfulness comes from the use of it as a translation of the Pali word sati by Buddhists themselves. Recollection would be a better translation. Yeah, when it comes to translations, I really rely more on Bhante Sudaso nowadays, or Bhante Analayo. Also reading a lot of his books, like the Satipatthana perspectives and all the books he wrote on Satipatthana. So I think, if we look at like the etymology of the word, it has a lot to do with recollection. But I think Bhante Analayo says that the Buddha used it differently, and it has to do there more with like awareness. Sati has to do more with awareness, and we shouldn't view it in light of its Sanskrit etymology, which does have to do recollection, because the Brahmins in the Vedic culture were using it in order sati in the context of recitation, the Vedas, right? You had to remember and recollect. And I think sometimes it is used like that in the suttas too. Or at least it suggests that it helps in recollecting. I think there's a sutta like that. But I think in my personal opinion, and from what I remember Bhante Analayo saying, sati, in the way we find it in the suttas, has more to do with awareness than with recollection. So with respect, Bhante, all these studies put aside, doesn't matter what researchers say on effective clinicians is one who finds what helps individual case by case. Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, yes, right? We can't take it to the extreme. I mean, when we want to help someone, we have to kind of like look at the evidence for whatever we're trying to do. We don't want to be reckless, right? Like, you just wouldn't take any chemicals. Like, if the doctor was to give you a pill, you just wouldn't take anything, right? What kind of pill is this? Like, what are the studies? I mean, that's the whole thing behind the drama right now with, what we're not supposed to talk about, that kind of pandemic. So I think when it comes also to helping people, whether it's through behavioral techniques, cognitive techniques, or any kind of mindfulness technique, we should be well informed by the literature, right? By the evidence. That doesn't mean we have to stick to it dogmatically. There's a lot of room for wiggling and making it unique to each person, right? Adapting it to each person. I think that's very important. I'm not about this cookie cutter, kind of thing where you just this is going to work for everyone. That's ridiculous. I don't think we can ever talk like that. So I think yes, trying to find what works for that person, but always coming from a kind of a evidence-based perspective to kind of guide you. So it's not like the Wild West of helping people. But that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm a little more conservative in my approach. Hassan, hello, Bhante. People like you who decided their life Dhamma are an inspiration to me. Oh, thank you so much. I'm just trying to do what I can. Sam, CBT treatment is not as effective as countless Dhamma talks. Yeah, and that might be true. That might be true for you. We all have different experiences in life. We have different temperaments, different personalities, inclinations. And yeah, I definitely don't think, CBT works for everyone. And Dhamma, if we look at it in the whole context, I think, as me living a monk, definitely I would say with, Dhamma has works more than CBT, although I've never, I've never been treated with CBT, although I've studied it and I've used CBT techniques. I would have to say, in general, yes, The Dhamma talks probably have done more for me also. You have been forced to take pills. I'm sorry to hear that, Scott. Um, there might be, within the medical context, there is certain situations where if a person's a threat to themselves or threat to someone's in danger, they can be hospitalized and be forced, to take drugs, or as a result of their, like, what do you call it, probation, or things like that, court ordered, where you're forced to do those kind of things. But with outside of those contexts, you should never be forced to take any pills, or forced to do any kind of therapy, or even go to therapy. You have your individual right of denying treatment, and you have to be aware of the consequences, right? If you're going to deny treatment, that things might get worse, but you have that right. You have the right to say no to any kind of intervention, or you being part of anything. But yes, I understand there is some times where your rights are temporarily suspended, and you can be forced to take medications or participate in certain things that you don't want to. Bhante, thank you for speaking about the other aspects of Dhamma, the importance of Sila. Have you been Brahma Viharas being spoken about the context? There is some interesting stuff in compassion-focused therapy. And I know, I have the book right here where they talk about that it's informed a lot by compassion, and especially from like the Tibetan perspective of the Brahma Viharas and compassion. So, and that's been around, I think, for at least 20 years, and it's really taken off in the last 10 years. So I know that there are attempts of presenting a more integrated integrated intervention, or therapy, or different things to people to help them, right? Not just like these kind of like 8-week program, 10-week program, and then you're out of here, or just very narrowly focusing just on mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapies, and kind of opening it up and making it more holistic, right? Like a more holistic kind of view on mental health and in health in general. So I do see the Brahma Viharas coming in. I mean, just on a like pop psychology level, like Bhante Brahmavanzo, right, from Australia, his kindfulness and his focus on being kind, and I think he's done a great job for trying to let people in the regular world at large know that mindfulness is just not enough. I love his joke that I don't know if I said it here, but Bhante's joke about the guard, right? So there's a guard, and the owner of the house says, "I want you to be mindful of everything when I'm gone." Right? Be mindful that no one comes in and steals, or be mindful of this and that. Just take care of the house. You're the security guard. He goes, "Yes, ma'am." She leaves on vacation. She comes back. The door is open. Everything's missing. And she tells the guard, What happened? I told you to be mindful." And then he goes, "Yes, I was mindful when they broke in. I was mindful when they picked up the TV. I was mindful when they took it out. I was mindful when they got the jewels. And I was mindful when they took it out." And, he was completely mindful. He was aware of everything, right? So mindfulness by itself is not enough, So then Bhante Baravansa was saying we need to practice kindfulness, right? Like beyond mindfulness. I think there was even like a conference called Beyond Mindfulness or something like that. So yes, I do see that in general, there's even in therapy, in the clinical realm, there's interest in incorporating more parts of the Dhamma, like the Brahma Viharas and other things like that. And that's really, I see it in the realm of what's called contemplative psychotherapy. So contemplative psychotherapy, I really think is going to be like where we're going to see most of the stuff happening, where it's not so narrowly defined just by like meditation as psychotherapy or mindfulness psychotherapy. Contemplative is a little bit bigger. It's not perfect, right? It's not Dhamma, but it's opening up to more different kinds of practices that you can incorporate into your medical well-being or clinical well-being. Hassan says, "Can you please talk about meditation, recognition of Buddha?" Yeah. So Buddha Nusati. There's 4 things that we should meditate, a monk should meditate upon every day. Buddha Nusati, Metta Nusati, Asubha Nusati, and Mara Nusati. So Buddha Nusati is recollecting the Buddha, right? Itipiso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Vijja Charana Sampanno Sugato Loka Vidu Anuttero Purisadam Masarati Satta Deva Manusannam Buddho Bhagavati. Why do we recollect the Buddha? So the Buddha is the embodiment of the Dhamma. He is our, our the ideal. He is the goal, which we're trying to reach, the state of arahantship, right? Completely be free. So the more you focus on the Buddha, the more you contemplate on the Buddha, the more you meditate on the Buddha, the more you recognize the value of the Buddha, the more you recognize the value of being free from suffering and nirvana, or however you want to call it, awakening. So then you have more saddha, more conviction. You have more motivation to actually practice the Dhamma, right? So the Buddha, to me, Buddha Nusati is really like a catalyst and fuel for the practice. It inspires me. Just kind of like someone who wants to be a surgeon or a doctor, they might think of like a certain famous doctor and they're like, oh, I want to be like that person. And they learn everything about him, and that motivates them to continue on their path to being a doctor. And as children, we had heroes, right? Like superheroes, Batman and Superman, and you want to embody their qualities. So the Buddha works like that for us, right? He's like an inspiration on the path. Hola, Miguel. Hace tiempo que no nos hemos comunicado. Ojalá en el futuro tenga la oportunidad de vernos. There's a friend from the Spanish Dhamma Online that I know right here named Miguel. If you don't mind telling us, what is a monk's schedule like? How do you find these 4 protective meditations in your day? So it depends on temples. Like every monastery can be different, but the general schedule, like it's usually like morning chanting and meditation, like a meal, and then like cleaning. There's a lot of cleaning to be done in temples. Then like, either you go pindapada, begging, or people bring food to the temple, and maybe you'll do a puja for them or something, some chanting for them, or maybe give a Dhamma talk for them. And then the rest of the day, there's temple work, or there's studying, or there's more meditation. And sometimes the schedules change in temples. Like some temples have like retreat time and non-retreat time, and monks travel and go to other places too. So I couldn't really say, like what it is. At least in my temple, it's like we wake up in the morning, we meditate, we chant, we have breakfast. There's cleaning, studying. Then we wait till lunch. Usually people bring us lunch, so we have to do like a puja, a ceremony, and we chant and we do a Dhamma talk for them, a short one. And then in the afternoon, we do whatever we have to do. Like today, we swept because it was so windy last night, and it destroyed actually this tarp that we had up, kind of like a tent. It was so we had to take it down. So I worked for like about 2 hours trying to, with some friends. Luckily enough, some friends came and helped me, and their father too came to help me take that big thing down. And then a Dhamma talk like I'm giving today. Then at night, there's usually another meditation session and chanting, but it varies. So your experience may vary. Every temple will be a bit different. How do I incorporate the 4 protections? Well, we have to chant them every day, so you kind of have to, you have to face them. But just looking at the Buddha all the time, right? Thinking about the Buddha is one way. Metta, just the way I interact with everyone. The Buddha told the monks that with every action that we do towards other monks, we have to do it from a place of like loving kindness and compassion. Asubha, right? Asubha is very good. The non-attractiveness of the body, right? That's the way I like to think about it. So it just helps keep the lust down and keep the sensuality down also. So I just think about my own body, the bodies of others, and things like that. And Mara, which is death, I think that's probably the one that I focus on the most because of like some stuff that happened in the past. Is liberating actually. Mara Nusati to me is it's like a big relief. It's like all this weight comes off when I think about death, and it's just refreshing actually to think about death. what comes from contemplating death is refreshing, right? Sí, saludos desde Chile. Y saludos aquí de Los Ángeles, California, a los chileños. Well, if there isn't any more questions, if you're typing it in, I'll wait another minute. But if not, we'll call it a day. It's Thanksgiving. Time to eat. Oh yeah, there is some here. Is somatic experience included in contemplative psychotherapy? I think so, because there is that mindfulness is there. So, mindfulness of the body, kind of like body scan is there. Or if you mean somatic, kind of like a feeling, like I think there is I think from both the Buddhist and maybe like Hindu based kind of like yoga as a psychotherapy. There are programs that are contemplative psychotherapies that are like yoga as psychotherapy. So I think, yes, there is a big part of somatic experiences included within the contemplative psychotherapy. So contemplative psychotherapy just like means like bringing in all the contemplative, all the meditative practices from the world, right? And trying to incorporate them or use them to help people, alleviate their suffering within the medical clinical context. So it's a very broad, it's a very, very, very broad field. It can be very broad. The thing that holds it together is that it's based on like meditation or contemplation. That's the focus. And then you can see it kind of like open up and become like a spider web or a net. Sí, claro que sí tengo Buddha Nusati, Mara Nusati, todo en español. I'm going to put my email, and if you want those translated in Spanish, so in the comments in the chat, you'll see it says casa de babana agrega gmail.com. So if you send me an email there, I can send you the translations. And if you don't see the email, just write it down. Casa de babana agrega gmail.com. Okay, everyone. It depends what you mean by yoga, Miguel. If we think yoga like asanas today, like, today when people think of yoga, they think of asana, posture. I haven't seen anything in the suttas that says that Buddha was doing asana practice besides like, the lotus pose, which is the sitting pose. If you mean yoga as like, as a lifestyle, I think, if it's very broadly used, like, as a way of trying to find moksha, liberation, then I think, yes, before he was the Buddha, the Bodhisattva was in a sense practicing yoga. But it's not what we know today. Whatever we think yoga is today, that's not what was happening back then. It was very, very, very different in those days. There wasn't even that much even meditation or anything like that. Like, it's very interesting. You can read this book by, I think her name's Karen Arbel, something like that. She's a professor in a university in Israel. And she really explains how, the context of what was happening during the time of the Buddha when it comes to meditation and yoga and all these kind of things, right? So I would really suggest you read her book, and you'll get a lot of your answers there. Yes, wishing for everyone to have a good day and good night. Yes, thank you for that. And I think we can end with that. So may you all be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. This was my last show. You'll still find me from time to time here on Buddhist Insights whenever Aya and Bhante have me here, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for joining me these last 4 weeks. I've been so happy to be with everyone here in November. I'm happy to see Bhante and Aya in Italy having a great time. It looks like they're getting a good reception, and hopefully soon I can come to Empty Cloud and visit everyone at Empty Cloud. So until we see each other again, I don't know when that might be. May you be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. Suki Hotu. Wish you all the best.